Today on Pilot's Discretion, test pilot and airshow performer Chuck Coleman is with us. He talks about teaching the Top Gun Maverick actors to pull Gs, what it was like to fly the chase plane for SpaceShip One, and what he thinks of the Icon A5 seaplane. Pilot's Discretion starts right now. Welcome, everyone. I'm your host, John Zimmerman of Sporties, and thanks for listening. Remember to visit sporties.com/podcast for today's show links and access to our archives. And please leave us a review if you enjoy this podcast. Today, I'm joined by a guest with perhaps the longest aviation resume we've ever had on this show. Chuck Coleman has flown a staggering array of airplanes, including the BD-12 kit plane, the Extra 300, the Proteus high-altitude jet, the chase plane for SpaceShip One, the Icon A5, and many more. He has been a test pilot, a charter pilot, an airshow pilot, and he's also an A&P IA mechanic. I could keep going probably for another 5 minutes, but I will stop there. Chuck, welcome to Pilot's Discretion.
Appreciate the opportunity to talk about airplanes mostly, John.
Let's start with Top Gun, because like so many pilots, so many people in America this summer, I saw the movie. I was really impressed by the flying scenes. We had Kevin LaRosa on this show a few months back, and he was telling us about sort of the cinematography side, getting the filming for those incredible air-to-air scenes. But you were involved with a different part of the production, working directly with the actors. Tell us about that.
Okay, well, before it was even shooting, I got a call out of nowhere and said, hey, we're interested in some aerobatic flights with people. And you kind of probe into it, and then you say, what's it about? And they can't answer that it's Top Gun and that. They have these code words they use also that we do. So they said, why don't you come up to the Instructor Airport? If you're familiar, it's in the desert, Mojave Desert, China Lake area. And we want to talk about flying Extra 300 with people. And so I did some probing around, and I go, well, it might be a movie I'm thinking they're making another one of. And so I fly into Instructor Airport. And I don't know if you're familiar with Instructor Airport. It's out in the middle of the desert, strip and everything. And I show up, and I was meeting executive producer Tommy Harper. And we talked a lot about things. And then all of a sudden he said, Tom Cruise wants to talk to you. And it's kind of like, oh my gosh moment type of thing, because if we hark back to 1986, Top Gun the original came out, and here we are 32 years later, and they're making a sequel to it. And then we're in the hangar, the big hangar, and it's the hangar. When you see the movie, it's a big archy hangar, and Maverick drives the motorcycle out of it type of thing. So it's kind of where he had the P-51. So I walk inside that hangar, magnificent hangar, and there's a P-51 sitting in the middle of it. And then I kind of wandered around, and you saw photos, and I go, wow, that's Goose and John Glenn and just all sorts of photos, because that's where Maverick's home is nowadays type of thing. So I did that. And then when I talked to Tommy said, hey, Tom Cruise wants to talk about flying his actors. And I recall some of the initial comments that Tom made is I need to prepare my actors to fly in F-18s. And then we talked about the logistics and everything and availability and everything. And I was ready to go. And then I talked about, because in fact, my first job out of college was at McDonnell Aircraft in St. Louis, and I worked on the F-18. So they were flying the Super Hornets for Top Gun Maverick. And I said, well, the roll rate's higher and an extra, just a slightly more Gs, but doesn't have the speed, obviously, and things like that. So we'd have to work with that. And Tom basically told me, he says, push them as hard as you can to do it. We want to make it much easier to fly F-18s if that's possible. So we did that, and then we kind of talked about airplanes, and the movie, and then you kind of try to reserve yourself to not be this fanboy. That's a call sign, but you don't want to talk about the old things. You just want to talk about airplanes and things like that. So we set up, and then within about a week or so, I was to fly to the Van Nuys Airport to start giving flights with the actors.
Yeah, well, tell me about flying with the actors. Was there a difference between the actors you flew with and how they approached it and how they handled the G training?
Well, basically, all the actors had no flight experience in small airplanes, and so I did hundreds of flights, aerobatic flights with people, and you go, wow, this is a pretty good step, going from no flying to aerobatics and an extra. And that, so I knew some of them, Miles Teller, of course, and Glenn Powell, who played John Glenn in Hidden Figures. He was one of the actors, and Monica Barbaro, and just down the list we went to there. And then we basically did an introduction flight out of Van Nuys Airport, and so I went north to familiar territory up in the high desert, and we did a lot of aerobatics, and we loops, rolls, all that stuff. And what was also outstanding about the program is, I mean, basically Tom Cruise set this program up. I mean, they had a few flights in a 172 with actually the LaRosas Junior and Senior, and then a few flights later, they said, "Here's an extra 300. We're gonna do a lot of G training and aerobatics and everything like that." So we did a lot of those flights, and what was also a great addition is we would write reviews. So after each flight, we'd write a review. I'd write a review, and the student slash actor would write a review. And what we learned was that Tom Cruise was reading those every day. He was looking forward to reading them, and we're thinking, wow, he's doing so much on this movie, and he's excited to read the reviews of the actors.
So, can you tell which actor did the best during that training?
Um, I really can't rank them that way, but they were all outstanding because you'd get nauseous and things like that, and occasionally the bag would be needed. But their recovery, one was having that nauseousness all the while, and we would settle down, and about 10 seconds later, and say, "I'm ready to go. Let's go." So I think part of it was to have them adapt to the nauseousness of flying F-18 slash aerobatics and the extra. But I'm really kind of holding to myself how I rank the actors.
And how do you prepare for G's? Is it just a matter of doing it and pulling G's, or is there any other way to train for it?
Well, and basically, like I've said a lot of times, that there's no there unless you have a centrifuge in your yard or something, there's no way to train for it. So you got to go out and fly. And so what we did is an extra 300L, which I was flying. We can do about 5 Gs level flight, but to get 8 Gs, the maximum with two people on board is 8 Gs. We kind of did a spiral downwards, and the main focus was sustained Gs. I mean, a quick, 8G pull, that's not as rugged as, 8 Gs for 10, 15 seconds or something like that. So, and it was kind of leading toward the canyon that they have to go bomb out and everything, that we wanted. The pull was going to be, 8 or beyond the limits of an F-18 and stuff. So we wanted to do that. And what you'll also find is that Tom's talked about this a lot, that you can't really replicate what the faces look like when you're pulling Gs and that. So those are the real Gs. And kind of one of the remarkable things about the training, and it turned into 140 flights. I mean, yeah, I thought maybe a few here and there, but they found that their confidence was improving on all the actors. And in fact, you'll Google search it, read articles, that they actually reshot some of the scenes because they were saying, "You act differently. What's up with that?" And their confidence, and they say it must be all the aviation training you're going through to make you act this way. So they had to reshoot for that. And in fact, Monica Barbaro said in one of her interviews that they were really good G tolerance. And then when they went post and looked at the footage of them in the F-18, they said, that doesn't look as intense as we'd like it. Can you act some more intensity to it? So some of them may have had to do that. So it's just a great outcome that they were prepared. And yeah, some of them had their use of bags and everything, but they recovered real quick. So no wasted time flying in the F-18. So that's a great highlight for me, giving them training.
Yeah, well, the result was fantastic. And I know you've also done some high G training and a lot of work on the SpaceShip One program, the first crewed aircraft to complete a private spaceflight. Many of us probably remember watching that. So you got to even fly the chase plane for that, which sounds like a lot of fun to me. And most of us can probably remember watching that, the feathering system we heard a lot about. But from being on the inside, what was sort of the hardest challenge with that project? What's something that we might not appreciate from the outside about that?
Okay, well, kind of my background on the SpaceShip One is that I got a call from Scale Composites. Burt Rutan runs Scale Composites and talk about an icon of aviation and design and everything. And basically, there was a Proteus that Mike Melville's mostly flying, and they said, we need another pilot to fly the Proteus. And so I didn't know anything about the SpaceShip One at that time. This is 2002. And so I go, wow, I'd love to be involved with that. So I moved out to California, and then I showed up, and Burt Rutan's there, and he's welcomed me to the company and everything. And he says, I want to show you some stuff out back. So we go outside in the back hangar, and there's the White Knight, which is the carrier for the spaceship. And it actually flew that same week the first time and everything. And then he says, yeah, we're making a spaceship and we're going to attach it to the White Knight and go up and make astronauts and things like that. So this is 2002. And so, I was flying air shows at the time and a lot of training in my extra 300. And I kind of brought that with me. And Doug Shane, who was kind of the director of flight operations, he kind of brought me and he says, hey, G tolerance and training and all this stuff, for the spaceship, we really need. So I was flying a lot of flights, particularly when we were getting close to the things, because the first spaceship's flights were glides. And there's a documentary called Black Sky. That's, wow, it's Peabody Award winning, and it was done by Scott B. And it's about the whole SpaceShip One program and how it succeeded making astronauts. But we went into the training, the G tolerance and everything, and then we said, well, actually, this extra is amazing, and it's maneuverability and everything. He says, why don't we test the avionics for the spaceship to see if it holds up to an extra? So that's kind of a few flights I went in, and then I was brought them back, and they downloaded it, and they go, whoa, my gosh, this is insane stuff that this extra is doing. And so it kind of passed the mustard for SpaceShip One. And then kind of some of the challenges were down the line is, yeah, the training was good, but then the chase part of it was kind of a need. We had actually three levels of chase planes. We had the high altitude, which was Alpha Jet, provided by Paul Allen, was the sponsor for the SpaceShip One. We had a beach Starship, evolved from the Long Easy, as every aviation people might know. And then I was kind of the low level, help the spaceship land chase plane. And the thing about the SpaceShip One, if you look at pictures of it, and that it's got a lot of portholes in it. And yeah, the wheel height visibility isn't really good, so I was kind of helping them with wheel height calls. And it's a glider too, so there's no go around and everything. You got to make that landing really good on the first time. So we did a lot of that, and then chase flying and that. And I know on the first flight into space, Mike Melville heard some bangs and things like that, and then we kind of said, "Why don't you look me over? Because it could be something like a tail coming off the spaceship or something." And then we were able to look in real close and see a little bit of deformation of the tail of the spaceship. And it reassured him because he says, wow, the tail's still there. I'm going to make a good landing. And he made a good landing. And what's remarkable, too, about the program is it went from the first glide in August 2003, I believe, I'm pretty sure, to June 2004, went into space. And then we did 2 more space flights later in the year to win the X Prize. And it's like, wow, look at this, what happened in 3 years that we did a spaceship and went into space. So kind of some of the highlights of my flying is being involved with that. And in fact, Burt, I don't know, Burt, they wanted to say, hey, let's do some more flights. And I think they said, let's retire it, put it in a museum, and we're going to move on to a spaceship too, and that. And so Burt actually told me in private one day, or actually in public, that I was on the list to fly the spaceship. So it's kind of one of those things that didn't happen, but I'm just so thankful to be involved in what's a pioneering event out in the Mojave Desert.
Yeah, it's absolutely incredible, the pace. I think you nailed it there, that to go that quickly from idea and first flight to going all the way to space. I'm curious what your take is on why it didn't really last, the concept. You know, if you look today at Blue Origin or SpaceX, they land with parachutes like we did in the Apollo program. Why do you think the glider landing on a runway approach that SpaceShip One sort of pioneered there didn't take hold?
I think you'll find in aviation that you can do one of something and be spectacular. But when you try to replicate it with multiple vehicles and everything, it's there. And then, yeah, the one of the most remarkable things, I mean, Elon Musk was starting at a similar time, early 2000s, also with the SpaceX. And they said, well, reusability, we'll land the boosters on the ground. And if you see a footage of their where they had multiple boosters and they landed kind of in formation on the ground, that's spectacular. So that's kind of showing, wow, that's true reusability, because that was the goal of a Spaceship One was, hey, we just have to take an engine out and put a new engine in and do a next flight. And the feather was a great thing that actually Burt learned from the X-15 program back at Edwards, 15 miles away, that we need a carefree reentry was the kind of thing. And parachutes are great for that. A feathering device is great for that. And it's just remarkable. I mean, the Spaceship Two has been very high, and I know they're making improvements on it right now. And then the Blue Origin's doing it, and of course, Elon Musk's SpaceX is orbiting the Earth and everything like that. So it's just amazing to see the evolution of space flight. And I kind of feel, okay, 2004, we went to space in the Spaceship One. That might have been a good spark for the rest of the industry. Says, wow, if they can do that out in the desert, let's give it a go. And I think Burt Rutan's responsible for a lot of innovation and inspiration to produce things like that.
Chuck, let's take a quick break. And then when we come back, I want to ask you about some more interesting airplanes you've worked on.
Earn your pilot's license, get current, or add a rating. No matter what your goal is, Sporty's pilot training app will save you time and money. It's available on all your devices, including iPad, iPhone, Android, and smart TVs, so you can access Sporty's award-winning courses anywhere. Plus, with automatic sync between platforms and free lifetime updates, you'll always be up to date. Over 25 courses are available, from private pilot to aerobatics. Visit sportys.com/discover for a free trial. Now, back to Pilot's Discretion.
We're back with Chuck Coleman, who has been around a number of unique airplanes throughout his long aviation career. So, Chuck, I'm going to run down a list of airplanes one by one that you've been involved with one way or another. Can you give me an interesting fact or opinion about each of these?
Okay.
Let's start with, to me, one of the most interesting airplanes ever proposed that probably a lot of people don't know about or have forgotten, the BD-10, a proposed supersonic kit-built jet from the always colorful Jim Beatty.
Right. And that's actually, I was at McDonnell Aircraft working on things, and at the time, we're talking early 90s, they ended up losing programs X F-23 or something, and they got rid of a lot of the older people that were my mentors in that. And so I said, hey, let's find a smaller company. So I went to Jim Beatty, BD-10, supersonic jet is advertised type of thing. And I worked on a lot of the design and build, and we did the first flights out of Mojave, California, kind of the thing. And then we did a lot of flight testing out of Mojave too. You build one airplane and it's great, but you try to build multiple airplanes of the same kind, and that's challenging, and the money wasn't really flowing. But I was real happy with my part of the BD-10, and it didn't go supersonic, but it's kind of another BD. Another interesting thing is that Burt Rutan actually worked for Jim Beatty on the BD-5 about 20 years prior, and he came in and he made the BD-5 one of the greatest flying airplanes. So basically, the BD-10, we ran out of money, and it's kind of a plane that's a small asterisk in the history of aviation.
How about the Visionaire Vantage, what many people saw as kind of a prototype for the very light jet boom in the early 2000s?
Yeah, that was kind of going there, and we feel the Eclipse may have evolved from that. And actually, Burt Rutan's Scale Composites, they built the prototype for the Visionaire Vantage. And again, trying to build multiple ones and FA certification, of course, is challenging. But if you look at the performance of the Visionaire Vantage, it was like a 400 something knot airplane and not much fuel flow. And so it kind of, I feel it set the spark for an Eclipse type of plane. And then now we have the Cirrus Vision Jet and things like that. So I feel like I was kind of considering a few of the programs kind of be, well, someday this will evolve, but maybe we're a little ahead of the time back then.
Yeah, it's kind of the story of the SpaceShip One, that maybe that product didn't make it, but it did spark a movement there that has taken hold. So I think Visionaire Vantage in many ways did sort of light that spark in the light jet world.
Yes.
How about the Virgin Atlantic Global Flyer, the first jet to fly solo nonstop around the world?
Well, that's also one of the remarkable things about Burt Rutan and Scale Composites is I was brought on to be the Proteus pilot, chase for the SpaceShip One. But as an engineer, I would work on the Global Flyer under John Carco, kind of led that up. He's a famous aviation entrepreneur also. But anyway, I did all the flight controls, the fuel systems, the cockpit area, just lots of things for the Global Flyer. And you kind of hark back to the Voyager back in 1986, same year Top Gun was in theaters. And it was a 10-day travel around the world for Dick Rutan and Jeannie Yeager. And Steve Fawcett came to Scaled and Burt and said, hey, I want to do it in a jet, and yeah, you would set records in a jet and everything. But it almost, looking back on it, it almost looks like, wow, that was almost too easy to do it because he had an autopilot. So he sat up there for 3 days in the Global Flyer, which we have like call signs for airplanes at scale. That was called the Capricorn. And then it became the Virgin Atlantic Global Flyer. And what's remarkable about that, it set the records, easily, but it wasn't the first. So Dick Rutan can still say he was first to fly around the world, which he was. But it's just remarkable that, here we are, 20 or more years later, and we're building a jet that went around the world nonstop. And I think we need more efficient airplanes, and that's the ultimate in efficiency is the Global Flyer.
You mentioned the Proteus, a fascinating airplane, high altitude, long endurance jet. You've got hundreds of hours in that airplane. Tell us about that.
Well, kind of that was my initial coming out to Scale Composites for Burt Rutan, and Mike Melville. He did the first flight and a lot of flights around the world, and he was, hey, I'm in the spaceship, so we need another pilot. So I did that, and so Mike Melville and we flew a lot. I don't really take vacations and stuff, and I've been, I grew up in Michigan and went to University of Michigan and then went into aviation. I'd never been across the ocean. So my first times ever across the oceans was flying the Proteus. So Mike Melville and I, we flew the Proteus from Mojave to Bangor, Maine, to Iceland, to Italy, type thing. So it's my first time across the ocean is flying a Proteus. And so what was great about the Proteus is that airliners are typically, below 45,000 feet or so. And so in the Proteus, we would, well, let's get a block altitude of like 55,000 feet. So there's no other planes up there except maybe some military planes or something. So it's just high performance, high altitude. And it's just, wow, it's up there. And actually up at that altitude's close to 60,000. You can see a little darkness in the sky, the view of the Earth, and a little bit of curvature, maybe. So we're kind of getting close to what's considered space, but just remarkable. And then I actually dropped a prototype rocket off the back end, and it went on the ground and everything, and Mark 82s off of it, and just lots of things. And we were shot with laser beams, type of things, and just all sorts of pylons. So it's, wow, what a adventures, and then across the Pacific over to Australia and everything. And it's like, wow, what an amazing plane. It's still flying now. It's flying all the time at Mojave still, but mostly locally, not across the ocean anymore, it seems.
So these days you spend a lot of time on the airshow circuit, and you have off and on over the years for decades. You do performances, you do flight training, you give rides, logging a lot of time in that extra 300. I'm curious from your perspective, if you're either watching or flying with another aerobatic pilot, is there one maneuver that you can watch them fly that tells you what you need to know, that tells you if they can fly aerobatics or not?
Tumbling the airplane, and it's wow. Every time it's just wow for tumbling airplanes. And that's kind of some of the things I did with the actors for Top Gun Maverick. I showed them a lot of the maneuvers that the jets wouldn't do. Not that jets are different than props because we got that prop wash blasting in the tail the whole time. So we can tumble, we can fly backwards, we can do all these other things with type of things. And it's just spectacular to tumble extra is my favorite.
Yeah, it's amazing to watch from the ground, but don't go try to tumble your 172. That's not going to go well. Chuck, we always like to close these episodes with a segment we call Ready to Copy. So I'll ask some questions on a wide variety of topics, and you give me your quick answer. Are you ready to copy?
Ready to copy.
What airplane in your vast logbook was the most difficult to fly?
The BD-12.
And why is that?
It was unstable for its first flight. Pitch unstable. It only made one flight.
You've got a lot of time in the Lancer 4P, a beautiful airplane, but one with a somewhat checkered safety record. Is it a good airplane or a bad airplane?
It's a good airplane if you respect the flying qualities, keep the ball in the center and the landing pattern type of thing. It's just, wow, a 300-knot airplane you build in your garage. And it evolved into the Columbia 400, I believe. And but it's just got to pay attention to the stall characteristics on a Lancer 4P, but it's a safe airplane otherwise.
Another airplane with a somewhat uneven safety record is the Icon A5 seaplane. Great looking airplane. And you've got a lot of time in that. So same thing, good airplane, bad airplane, just need to respect it.
Amazing airplane. The flying qualities, it's like easy. If you learn to fly in another plane and fly Icon, it's like so easy. But if you go the other direction, it's difficult to fly other planes after you learn in the Icon. But it's amazing planes, and the ground's unforgiving, and we all know that. So that's the problems they've had.
You've built 5 airplanes, I think, by my count, many of them at least. What character trait makes for a successful airplane builder?
Persistence type of thing. And my first plane was a Pitts, like I mentioned. And you got persistence. You always got that list of things to do. And you're always thinking about it and doing it. And you're not just letting it sit there for months and building it. But then you'll find, if I wouldn't have got into building the Pitts, for example, wow, where would I be now? It's kind of like it's kind of led toward a, airshow pilot performing, and then Top Gun Maverick and SpaceShip One chase and everything. And it's just kind of, wow, spectacular. And I go to EA Oshkosh Air Venture almost every year, and I was there this year, and it's just, wow, this is aviation, and its pinnacle is experimental airplanes.
What's a test pilot habit that the rest of us regular GA pilots could take that would make our flying safer or easier?
I think the big thing for me is the discipline of flying. Like if you're doing a flight test, you got a flight test card that you review. And if you got other people involved, you got a pre-flight briefing and everything. And you've got a set of goals on your flight test card, and you fly toward those goals. And then you don't ever say once in a while, "Ooh, what if I try this?" You don't do that. It's the discipline of a test pilot that makes a difference for the success of a airplane. So I would say discipline, and it's the same for flying, anything.
If I'm going to go pull 5 or 6 Gs for the first time, what's your best tip for me? Assuming I have an airplane that can handle it.
Basically, the G suits, they kind of do it, but you basically want to keep the blood in your brain so you can still see and you don't gray out and black out. So you just strain your lower part of your body to try to keep the blood boosted to the head. And what's amazing is you can pull 5 or 6 Gs, usually no problem even the first time. But then when we do a sustained 5 or 6 Gs, that's when you'll start graying out, and you'll lose your vision and things like that unless you strain in that. And that's where G tolerance is about. You got to practice, and then you're G tolerant.
You mentioned you're a native of Michigan, which I think is one of the most beautiful places to fly in the U.S. What should be my next stop when I'm in Michigan next? What's a overlooked or hidden gem?
Well, my family is from Ludington, Michigan, and there's an airport right there. And actually, I have a hangar there. And so stop in and we'll show you Ludington. Ludington's the home of the car ferry that goes to Manitowoc, Wisconsin. And so this time of year, Michigan can't be beat. It's just, wow. So come to Michigan. We'll do some flying and exploring.
Our last question is always the same on Pilot's Discretion, Chuck. You have one final flight, and we want to know, what are you flying and where are you going? You've got a long list to pick from, so let us know.
Well, I got to say the Extra 300 is that airplane, and let's go out and tumble the Extra 300. So that's my plane.
Chuck, thanks for being on the podcast.
Appreciate the opportunity, John.
Thanks for listening to Pilot's Discretion, brought to you by Sporties, training and equipping pilots worldwide for over 60 years. For more episodes and links to additional information, visit sporties.com/podcast. And if you have comments or guest ideas, email us at podcast@sporties.com. I'm John Zimmerman. We'll see you next time on Pilot's Discretion.